Welcome all. Thank you for joining us uh, for this important conversation. I'm going to give a minute for our colleagues to join us. When you come in, please put your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We always like to make sure we're a community of practice. We're listening and learning from each other. So let us know where you're calling in from, where you're joining us from, the institution or the organization you're a part of as we get this conversation going. Welcome. I do see there's some folks that are putting on AI, and I just want to make sure that this will be made public and available on our website, and those that have registered will be able to follow up. But ask for those of you to not necessarily put in AI. If you can disable that, that would be appreciated. We want to have an authentic conversation as we go back and forth, having this important conversation with you all. Great, welcome. See our colleagues here all across the country. Appreciate you joining us. Welcome. Hope you can see everybody else who's joining us as well. We've got a lively conversation we want to have with you. This is one of multiple conversations that we know we need to be having about our community, our students, our institutions, our leaders, and partner organizations, and making sure that we are addressing what it takes to serve our students overall as higher education continues to evolve, adapt, and lead to address societal needs and serve our communities. So welcome. I'm going to introduce myself. We're going to get going. My name is Deborah Santiago. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Excelencia in Education. Thank all of you who are joining and putting in your name and where you're joining us from. I'll be the facilitator for this discussion today on Beyond the Hype, a roadmap for ethical, high-impact implementation of AI in colleges and universities. And for us, this is an important conversation, as we know it is for many of you who've chosen to join us, because there's a lot of conversation as higher education continues to adjust and adapt. And for us, part of getting beyond the hype is to better understand and more critically examine the strengths and limitations, the opportunities and the challenges of using AI in a manner that is ethical and adds value to education, which we know is inherently a human enterprise, right? It's not all about AI. We don't want to negate that, but we also know that AI, amongst our other things, are tools that can be helpful for us to meet our mission and goals. So I want to be clear about why we're partnering to host this event and have this conversation. A little bit of Excelencia in Education. We partner with colleges and universities across the country to help them as they embed student-centered, data-informed, continuous improvement cycles into their strategies and their practices. Unapologetically start with a Latino lens, but making sure that as we address issues, looking at this young, fast-growing population, there's a transformation that can serve all students who are in institutions in a way that is really reflective of a post-traditional majority of students anyway. And that's an opportunity for all of us to think about what we've done, what we're doing, who we're serving in that process, and how we can make sure that they get the quality education that they deserve and that they're looking for from each of us as educators and institutional leaders across the country. So that's our role and our expectation. We have the good fortune to partner with some of the folks that I'll be introducing in a moment here in doing this kind of work and showing our commitment. But before we do that, we know Excelencia always make sure we look at data, evidence-based practice, and leadership strategies. And I don't want to forget to mention that, part of AI, and we've heard lots of discussions about pros and cons, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, that ultimately this is about students. And so 3 little very quick points that we can follow up with. We have lots of data as we're at Excelencia continuing to look at the framing of the use of AI for our students overall. And we've seen that Latino youth, their usage of AI exceeds many of their peers. And so while we have students of all backgrounds that are increasingly using AI for lots of purposes in research and student services and elements, that Latino youth are really using AI quite a bit, and that the Latino workforce in AI is also growing. And that's important for us to recognize. It's not just a consumption of a tool, but we are actively engaged in what the tool can be. And our partners in this conversation are also a part of that in the effort going forward. So thinking about AI, I wanted to start with a quick poll before I introduce my colleagues as we get into this conversation. And I'd ask our colleagues who are helping support this to put our first poll up. How would you describe your stance on AI in higher education? Do you see lots of opportunities? Are you looking for opportunities? You see potential, but you're not sure. I'm asking you to be engaged because this is a conversation where we don't want to talk at you. We want to make sure that this is engaging you and you're sharing with us where you are as we look to talk about an example in a very important institution in our network, Long Beach City College, community college, and efforts that their partners also involved in. Are you seeing risks, or do you not expect there to be a meaningful positive impact? Please make sure that you fill that out. We'll give you a couple seconds to know where you are as we continue this conversation. See if people are responding, but we have a summary of the poll here. There we go. Thank you very much for showing it. So we're seeing that there are many opportunities and you're actively looking for responsible ways to leverage that. That's about 2/3 of attendees. Thank you. Appreciate knowing that. And that's your strategy and approach. One more quick poll before we get to the conversation. And you can see kind of where you are. How would you describe your institution's readiness in implementing AI? So the first one is about you. How about your institution? Are you actively improving your strategy towards implementation? Do you want to implement but lack data? Do you have capability and capacity, but you're not convinced it's worth it? Or it isn't a strategic priority yet? We have another couple of seconds here and see what we've polled in here to get a sense of our colleagues who are on the call with us. Great. Thank you. Looks like we're a little bit more evenly split here between actively improving our strategy and moving towards implementation. And then you want implementation, but you lack data, technical, governance capacity to do so. Appreciate that. I think you're appreciate very much you joining this conversation then, because we've got colleagues here who are going to talk exactly about that to our conversation. So very grateful and fortunate that we have a longstanding partner with us who is going to share a little bit about their experience as an institutional leader, as an institution is continuing to evolve their work in ethical ways and going beyond the hype. We have the president of Long Beach City College and president and resident at Excelencia in Education, Mike Munoz, is going to be joining us to a very hands-on case study perspective of what's happening real time at the institution, what's happening. We also have Rahim Rahan, who is the CEO and co-founder of AQL Labs, who is partnering with Long Beach City College in their efforts to make sure that they are doing work with AI that's ethical and supportive of the students that they're committed to day in, day out. And with him is his colleague, Amin Qazi, who is the Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder of AQL Labs. So for us, this is an example of partnership, innovation, commitment to focusing on students, that we have this group that's here ready to talk to you a little bit about our efforts and consideration. We're going to have they're going to share a little bit of time together. Then we're going to have a plática where we had just very authentic to us conversation between us about what we're doing, what we're seeing, challenges and opportunities. And we are going to leave a little time at the end for some Q&A. So please make sure to put some questions or comments that you have there. We'll do our best to get there depending on the strength of the conversation. If not, we will follow up and you'll be able to get access to this information as we continue. So with that, I'd love to hand it off to Rahim to get us started and share a little bit about your work and experience in using AI in ethical ways to make sure institutions and students are served well. Rahim?
Thank you so much, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited about the conversation. Thank you for yourself and Dr. Munoz for inviting us to be a part of this conversation. So I'd like for us to dive into the part about why AI is such an opportunity right now. If you could please advance the slides to the next slide, please. So one of the things about this moment and this innovation is we have an innovation that is actually producing intelligence. And so that is a very distinctive kind of paradigm for innovations. It's the first real technology that really seeks to augment our cognitive capacity and expand our intelligence. We've had technologies, for example, like machine learning that automate or that kind of create meaning out of patterns of data. But this is fundamentally different. And some of this is a result of some of the shifts in, computing, the convergence of big data, the kind of breakthroughs we've seen in deep learning, neural networks, etc. So there's a combination of innovations that have come together to create kind of like the current wave of innovation in generative intelligence, AI, artificial intelligence. And one of the things that we believe fundamentally is that, the organizations that think critically, engage proactively, really try to understand what the potential is, those organizations are going to derive advantage and benefit faster and more thoughtfully and more critically. And we think it's really critical for the equitability of this innovation, for the safety of this innovation, that, SEAL certified HSIs, minority serving institutions, that these institutions are at the vanguard, that they are leading, and that they are shaping that innovation. If you could go to the next slide, please. So one of the quick things I wanted to say, again, things are moving so quickly in AI. We're seeing models double in capacity almost every 3.5 months. And that is a remarkable pace of innovation. And, this is research that was published last year in Nature, and it's just modeling some of the data about the open models and the rate of kind of capacity. But, one of the ways to think about this is that a model today that has 7 billion parameters, a large language model, that model is as powerful as last year's model that had 70 billion parameters. And so that just gives you a sense of how quickly and how powerful this technology is moving. One of the things to also keep in mind is that adoption has scaled so dramatically. We had 100 million users of ChatGPT within 60 days. It took Facebook 4.5 years to get that kind of adoption. It took TikTok 9 months to get that kind of adoption. And roughly today, more than 50% of all developers are using generative AI in code development. And so there's just been remarkable adoption and speed. If you could go to the next slide, please. Um, One of the things that I think is really critical for institutions to grapple with, and I think it is a really important challenge, and one of the things that we see many institutions are truly perplexed by, is where should we deploy AI and where can we cause harm, and where can we create benefit, lasting benefit. And I think this framework created by two scholars, Bharat Anand and Andy Wu. It was published in the Harvard Business Review at the end of 2025. I think it's a really powerful framework because it tries to differentiate the types of knowledge that you would want to deploy AI against, and then various different categories of use cases. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do think it's important that they call out the difference between, bodies of knowledge, bodies of intelligence, bodies of data that are more tacit based, where context, intuition, experience are very nuanced and matter a lot, versus, bodies of knowledge where, it's very documented, clearly codified, stored knowledge, highly structured data. And essentially they posit that, the areas where you're going to have both more success and less risk is where not only are the risks lower, but where you're dealing with more explicit data and codified knowledge, right? And so I think this is just one framework to consider. There are many other frameworks out there, but I think in terms of understanding how colleges are going to deploy these technologies, this is one of the areas that I would recommend colleges to consider. Just a little bit about us, if you could go to the next slide. So we're a social venture. We were created in early 2024. The next slide, please. And our mission and focus is trying to help institutions unlock this opportunity, both for self-actualization and helping them to become kind of exemplars in this moment. So we focus very much on the earliest stage of education technologies, and we're focusing on helping institutions, many of whom don't have the capacity or sometimes the engineering capability on campus. And so our hope is to help those institutions kind of leapfrog very ethically, very safely with those technologies. If you could skip ahead to a couple of slides. So yeah, this slide. So one of our things that we're focused on is, again, helping these institutions become exemplars in AI. And again, we think it's very critical that these innovations are in service of delivering equitable outcomes. They need to be grounded in ethics, in safety, in transparency, in visibility. They need to be co-developed and co-designed with students, with faculty, with administrators. We think data is really essential in order to enable all of that. And lastly, we think it's really critical for institutions to have very focused, very thoughtful multi-year strategies grounded in real use cases. Um, so whether it's, strategy, whether it's data and infrastructure, um, analytics, all of those things, we're helping colleges to build out those strategies, to really build out their capabilities and their AI infrastructure so that they can lead in this moment. And then the next slide, please. I think one of the things that we really believe in, and it's been really critical as we learn with institutions about how to do this, is to kind of think about, the traditional plus AI, the bolt-on model versus the AI plus paradigm. And I think we think that artificial intelligence is such a profound shift. It's such an enabler in terms of what it has potential to do, both in terms of harm, but also in terms of positive impact, that it forces institutions to truly rethink and redesign workflows, opportunities. But again, that requires real thoughtfulness, real engagement, and real critical um, evaluation of technology capability, and ethics. And last but not least, I want to leave you with three questions. If you go to the next slide, we've mentioned safety, we've mentioned ethics. Basically the agreements, the negotiations, the tools that are deployed today, the contracts you sign essentially are going to shape what equity looks like in artificial intelligence on your campus for the next decade. And we think there's really three really, really critical questions you need to ask. Um, Number one, the question is like, does it work for your students? And one of the things to really keep in mind is that a lot of the generic technologies, a lot of the generic AI tools, those tools have not been trained and designed with data that is representative of many of our learners on these campuses, whether they're low-income learners or first-generation learners, et cetera. So I think it's really important to ask vendors to disaggregate some of the performance of their tools and to really investigate and interrogate that before you just sign on to something. A second question is the privacy and the security of the data, of the training. We know that for a number of student populations, they have a lot of security, a lot of issues that we need to be able to safeguard and protect. Not only FERPA, but also, documentation status, language ability, all kinds of things are very sensitive, very private. And so it's really important that the data, the security of these tools is fundamental, and that you all understand the privacy layers that are being put in place. And last but not least, I think it's really critical to think about, thinking about the use cases again and harm and whether it's tacit or kind of codified data. Are we like dehumanizing the learning experience using these tools? That's certainly not the goal. I think there's opportunities to extend capacity, to augment, to allow us to do things that we previously couldn't do. And so I think it's really important to ask that question about how these tools are being used and whether they are, removing or limiting the human agency and relationship, or whether they're enabling and augmenting a richer relationship. So those are some of the three questions we think that are really important for institutions to think about. I'm going to turn it over now to Mike, Dr. Munoz, to talk more about the work that him and his team are leading. Dr. Munoz, thank you.
Thank you, Raheem. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone. I'm Mike Munoz, Superintendent President at Long Beach City College. And I'm really excited to kind of help frame and bring some life to many of the slides that Raheem just presented in terms of the Long Beach City College kind of case study and how we are really leaning into this work. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I would love to I'd like to zoom out a little bit before I zoom in. So zooming out, and I wonder if many of you have shared this experience, going to your LinkedIn, opening up your LinkedIn and being flooded with different vendors. And I open my email box and I'm completely overwhelmed because I get all these vendors that say that we have the right AI solution. And it almost gives me anxiety, I'll be honest with you, because I can't wrap my mind around some of this technology and what it's going to mean for students and how to even just make an informed decision. Another layer I would add is that for the last probably 2 years, as I attend national conferences as well as local conferences, AI always seems to be on the agenda. But when AI is discussed, it's discussed at almost this 40,000 level foot looking down. And we don't really drill down, and I'm not really given the tools to come back and work with my colleagues at the college to really operationalize in a meaningful way. What does this mean for students? What does this mean for faculty? What does this mean for all of us? So I was very fortunate that Long Beach City College was included to be part of a community practice through the generous support of College Futures Foundation to work with AQL Labs to begin to start to help us refine a college-wide AI strategy. And so with some vulnerability, you're going to see the word draft on a lot of these slides today. And that, or at least the slides that I'm presenting. And that's because we're still building the plane as we're flying it. We're still going through our governance structures and having conversations and getting feedback. But I thought it was important to show folks in real time, like what can this look like for a college, and give a case study. So that's my intent today. So I'm going to jump into the slides. So first thing I want to say is that this work, our AI strategy work that we're doing collectively at Long Beach City College, is really grounded in our governance and institutional alignment. I want to give a big shout out to our board of trustees, specifically our board president, Uduak Intuk, for really having the foresight and the vision to say, you know what, again, coming back from one of those conferences and those questions being asked, does your college have a board policy and administrative procedure on AI? And if you don't, you should get one. Do you have a strategy? Because if you don't, you should have one. And so the board really prioritized for the college this need to really lean in and start to establish not only policies and administrative procedures, but as well as strategic direction for the college. So thanks to them, we really leaned into this work. And what I want to say too is that this work is really about establishing a clear vision for AI at LBCC. And what I have learned as I've gone around and talked to different stakeholders, whether it's faculty members or other administrators or classified staff or the board, AI kind of means something different to everybody. And so there was a lot of grassroots things happening at LBCC, being led by some amazing faculty or happening in different pockets of student services, but I didn't necessarily see a cohesive strategy for the college. And so, we had to really be able to begin to be able to articulate what is that strategy? How do we unify all of those grassroots efforts and have buckets? And then the last thing I would also kind of really drill down is that within our strategic focus, we really talked about using and leveraging AI in a way that's moving away from transactional to transformational programming so that we take the transactional pieces of people's work out of the equation, solve problems that are facing students and our colleagues, and really move into the transformational space of the work. And then the last piece I'll say before I go on to the next slide is that I felt like it was also really important to just name things and recognizing that a lot of people and some people in certain instances, are expressing concerns about like, well, what does this mean about this expansion AI? Are we going to be replacing people in positions? And so we've had to be very clear that is not what we're going to do. This is, again, about moving away from transactional activities into transformational programming. And to solve real life problems for students. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk you through some of, again, the framework that AQL Labs has helped us really start to think about. So the first is this idea around a new institutional priority. And so we're actually going to be we're currently going through a revision of our strategic plan at Long Beach City College. So you're going to see some of this work that's still in draft form eventually intersect with our revised strategic plan. And that will really, I think, help give a North Star for all of us at Long Beach City College as it relates to this AI work. And so for us, it's really about strengthening capacity for ethical, inclusive, and effective and equity-centered uses of emerging technologies in support of teaching, learning, workforce readiness, and operational efficiency. So the last part of the statement, those are the buckets. So when we start getting into use cases and we start getting into strategies and activities, you will see those strategies and activities align with those different buckets, from supporting teaching to learning to workforce readiness, and then essentially operational efficiency. We've been working through a team. We have a wonderful team at LBCC that's helping assist developing the draft mission for LBCC. And so again, this is not approved. This is still all draft documents as we're working through, but to give you kind of a preview of some of the conversations and the languages that we're using and having at the moment. And, really being able to talk about why this matters. And I think for me, thinking about why this matters it goes back to the statement that I made that we are trying to solve real life problems facing students. We talk so much about the digital divide, and we've heard about that terminology for those of us that have been working in higher ed for years. Well, now for me, this is about digital inclusion. How do we reframe the conversation so that we are expanding access and persistence and completion and we solve these problems in a way where we're centering Latino students, African American students, and other historically underserved communities. So being really intentional about that, as well as thinking about aligning education with workforce opportunities. So we're really focused in kind of starting to make the case and doing the case building across campus. And then lastly, approach. I think it's really important to recognize that this is an iterative and evolving process. This isn't, an event. It's not like flipping on a light switch. Like, we are going through a full process, and that's what we're sharing with you, right? Is an example of what our process is looking like in vivo, in real time. As I mentioned, it's grounded in campus leadership and grassroots innovation. So we have an AI Leads work group that we've established. We have an AI Center advisory group that's really informed by faculty, key discipline faculty members, and we are expanding that group as we go. We've even had conversations where we recognize, we need to engage other disciplines beyond the ones we're just engaging now, because as we start to build out case uses, different discipline faculty might be impacted in different ways. So we need to bring more people to the table. So again, that informed dialogue and feedback, it's a learning loop, and we are committed to that. Next slide, please. So now let's really get into some of the overlays, because I think this is really important as we think about the case making for folks. So this is our current strategic plan. So we have 4 plan themes: inclusive, supportive, innovative, and synergy. And we've really been able to begin to think about how our AI work informs our strategic plan. And then we're aligning our strategic plan themes with our AI strategies. So we are really showing the alignment of how the AI strategic themes and strategies are going to bolster the strategic plan work that we're doing, not compete. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make. And so you can take a moment, kind of glance at this, but it gives you a sense of the sense making that we're doing and the connective tissue that we're aligning with our strategic plan along with our AI strategic themes. Next slide. So this is where I start to geek out. People who know me know I get super passionate and excited about this work. And this is now a preview of some of the AI case uses that we are going to be exploring at LBCC. And so what's really, again, interesting is that much of the conversations as we've been thinking about these AI case uses is really centered on solving problems that have been identified that are either student-facing problems or on the back end, efficiency issues that impact staff and other employees and impact the work that they do, right? And so that's essentially kind of just to distill it down. So these are 4 case uses that we're exploring. And another thing that I want to point out, so for the first case use, for example, guided enrollment, to be able to help support students, we look at the tremendous benefit that our students have when they engage with our counselors. we have some of the best counselors in the system at Long Beach City College. And in some contexts, that might be called advisement, but in California, we call them counselors. And they do tremendous work. But we know that many students aren't able to fully engage with counselors for a variety of reasons. Maybe their work life schedules don't allow it. And so how do we empower our counselors to leverage this tool to be able to reduce enrollment barriers for students? Again, to remove some of the transactional pieces that will allow them to scale in a meaningful way and work directly with the students that they serve and remove barriers. And so one example is looking at leveraging this tool to do some predictive things. So I'll give a real life case point. One of the discussions we were having yesterday, our research office has been able to identify through some predictive analytics that based on some enrollment taking patterns of students, some students you might be able to suggest that they do better in an 8-week course or an online course, or in this particular discipline, they might find more success with this combination of schedule. To empower the counselors with that information so that when they're working with a student one-on-one, it's not just take this math class, but based on some of the information we know about you, it might be helpful that you do this math class in an 8-week format. Again, only if the data supports that, but that's kind of like an example of some of the conversations on how this tool can be used to be able to help inform student decision-making and make the counselors more effective in providing those supports to the students. Another area is around student success coaching. And so we're looking at we have a case management model where we have student success coaches working with students around different milestones. And so how can we leverage AI to increase efficiency for them? Another case use we've identified is this idea of a web content optimizer. I think if I ask you, raise your hand if you think your website could be improved and that you have some inconsistencies across the pages in tone and language and where links are. So we thought about what if we use an AI tool to help us standardize and improve the way students access and the community accesses information on the website. So that's another case use we're exploring. And the last one is around predictive budgeting and supporting our planning to have more information based on using AI to help us make those informed decisions makings around resource allocation. So again, zooming out, 4 case uses, leveraging AI to solve problems, to make the student facing experiencing better, to make the employee experience better. Those are some of the case uses we're exploring. Next slide. So I have to give like a huge shout out to our faculty, specifically the soon-to-be Dr. Vincent Caleb. He is an amazing faculty member. And so I'm going to show on the left-hand side, you'll see some of the curriculum that's coming through. So remember, we talked about the buckets. We have the student-facing supports, and then we have the academic pathways and career pathways that we're looking at. So the left side of the slide, you're seeing that we've submitted for a new Associates of Science degree in AI and digital transformation that we'll be introducing, I believe, next year, as well as a series of certificates of accomplishment and completion and achievement. And so you can see this work that the faculty have been doing and working extremely hard to kind of not just think about the AI experience and case uses, but what are we doing with our academic pathway? And then on the right side, you can see some of the existing efforts that are being led by faculty and staff and how they then intersect with our AI themes as well as our strategic plan, because that plan alignment is very important to us to be able to properly message this work out to folks so that there's some clarity around it. And then, the last thing I want to say too is, well, actually, I'm going to go to the next slide and then I'll save this point for that. So let's go to the next slide, please. So some of the things that are in development that we're really excited about. Earlier this year, we took a team, our colleagues from Miami-Dade were incredibly wonderful and gracious, and they hosted us at Miami-Dade College to learn about some of the innovative AI work that they're doing. And we came back super inspired by Miami-Dade College, another Seal of Excelencia institution. And so, again, thinking of these ideas of being part of a community of practice. So we came back and we started really strategizing. And here are 2 things that we are currently under development. So it's a sneak peek into the future. So one is this idea of an AI innovation convening space. And this is where there is a hub for professional development, faculty support, and shared learning. And you can see kind of a graphic of what the space is going to look like, even being very intentional with the furniture. Our faculty member, Dr. Kep, is very vocal with the idea of it needs to look futuristic and kind of have that feel along. And so I just, again, a communal space that brings people together to really begin to improve their AI strategy and efficiency. The other is an applied learning space, and this is really focused on students that's in a dedicated environment for hands-on experimentation and innovation. And so this is where you think about your Maker's Lab and some of the real hands-on applied learning. And so these are two physical spaces that we are in development in. And I think it's really exciting. I also want to acknowledge one of our faculty members, Dr. Leslie Forehand from architecture, that's also been very involved and, sharing her voice and kind of helping us think through these strategies. So again, just big shout out to them, as well as the rest of the administrative team that's really helped with this. So next slide. So this is where I want to really tie it to the work of the Seal of Excelencia and show you our crosswalk with our framework, because this is really important. And I think it was, Raheem did a good job of mentioning this, and I talked about this at the beginning, but we have to be intentional. We do not want negative impacts to our most vulnerable students as AI is rolled out and implemented. And so one of the things we're being very conscious about, and we're having conversations about it at Long Beach City College, is not to just apply this AI strategy within the strategic plan framework, but taking it 2 steps further. And how does it intersect with some of our guiding frameworks, like the Seal of Excelencia and our Black Serving Institution work that we're doing as well? And so that is very important for us. And so this slide, I think, really starts to think about the SEAL components around data, practice, and leadership and what's required, and then aligning that with our AI strategy with intentionality. So this work is additive, not subtractive. So, yes, we're doing this work for all students, but we know that there are groups of students that have historically been disadvantaged when these different waves of technology have been implemented. And we want to be conscientious that we're not falling into any of those traps of the past. And so this alignment with the Seal of Excelencia is at the core of these conversations as well. Next slide. So again, just in closing, before I turn it over and we move into our Practica section, really, why does this matter and why this is important? So I think I've made some of these points already, but that we want to expand access and persistence and completion. Very intentional about reducing barriers for Latino students and other historically underserved communities. So again, ensuring digital inclusion, not growing the digital divide. And so in terms of our reality, I just want to keep it real. We are all learning. None of us are masters of this in this moment. This is playing out in real time. I'll be honest, there's a little bit of vulnerability here to even kind of preview some of this work before it's completely completed, because I think it's important for people to be able to see that this is an iterative process. This work is evolving. It requires a lot of conversations and a lot of engagement. And then lastly, we're going to continue to engage our faculty and staff as we begin to roll this out. So our commitment is that we cannot let AI just happen to us. We don't want to be on the receiving end of this technological curve and just feel like we've been ran over. We want to lean into this and help shape and drive it for our communities, for our campus, and for our students. And so I believe that's my last slide. And so I think now it's time to turn it over to the Practica component of the session.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Raheem. You'll be able to join us. And yes, I see. I think we're all tagged in there. Please, if you would just pin everybody so we can start a conversation. Raheem, you want to get us started? Because this is
sure.
we shared a lot of data and information and
Sorry.
just examples. Let's have a conversation, please.
So number one, I appreciate the commitment and the thoughtfulness, Dr. Munoz, of you and your team, and we've had amazing engagements with your team at Long Beach City College. I'm curious, like in this current moment, right? Like there's been lots of different waves of technology and innovation that have kind of come into education. We started with the internet over 2 decades, 3 decades ago, mobile devices, digital learning, predictive analytics. So there's been a whole wave of things, right? And I'm curious, like, what do you think is different or novel about AI, and why does that guide your actions in a different way than maybe how some of the leaders might have reacted a decade ago or 2 decades ago?
I think that's a really great question. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit and kind of go to some of my past experiences before I answer that question directly.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I've experienced as being a former vice president of student services who was responsible for helping make selections about big technological um, uh, programs related to student success to now being a president is that many times when we would do these technological adoptions in previous waves, the way they were implemented, how they were configured, I always used to joke and say, we're buying a Cadillac, but we're running it like a Datsun. Like we don't configure all the pieces and we don't use that tool to its full capacity because of a whole wide range of barriers. People don't want to do a lot of customizations because that gets complicated down the road for IT and whatnot. So there's just layers, right? So not blaming anybody or anything, but there's just acknowledging that this is complex. And so that kind of always lived in the back of my mind. But I think what's different in this moment is I have all those fears of like, we're not going to get this right. But to your point, like we've never had a tool that is creating knowledge and intelligence in the way that AI is. And this is going to be transformational. And this is the part where I get emotional and I get
Yeah.
really in my feels
Yeah.
is, I think this tool has so much potential to do really good for students. And again, through that lens of solving problems, you saw some of the examples of our case uses, right?
Yeah.
That we're exploring. But I think it also has the potential to do harm. And we
Absolutely.
have to lean into this moment. And so that's why I said we can't let this just happen to us.
Absolutely.
And so we have to be part of the drivers. We have to have our data, the data of the students that look like us on this screen in the data architecture as these AI tools are learning and making decisions. And so that is why I think this is very different. And then I go a step further that it's not just about the tool, but it's where it intersects with organizational culture, climate, structure, and systems. I think in 5 years from now, AI is going to be so integrated and embedded in our everyday lives and our
Yeah.
everyday experiences in our work that that is just a quantum leap forward from how we've experienced the world of work and how we
Yeah.
support students, and we have to be ready for it and we have to help shape it.
Absolutely. I love that.
So I have a question for you. Oh, sorry. I'm
No, I
sorry.
think that's right. And I think that you're also doing it together, which I appreciate very much because not only are you bringing faculty and staff and students and all together, but other institutions. We know our colleagues from Miami-Dade are on, and they're
Yeah.
actively engaging, and you learn from them as you go in there. That's part of this community of practice as well. So I just want to acknowledge that you're always a good partner and player in that space with all of us who are learning at our different stages.
I love that you said that. And if I could just piggyback on that, and why I want to just drill deeper on that is because this work could feel very overwhelming, intimidating, and scaring. If I'm going to be vulnerable, like when my board was like, we need a plan and we need a board policy, we need a P, and I was like, ¿Qué? ¿Cómo? Like, I don't even fully understand what all of this means in this moment. And as a president, that's like hard to say out loud. But I knew I had to be able to lean into my community of practice and like the colleagues from Miami-Dade to help do some sense making, to engage with folks from AQL Labs so that I could raise my fluency as a college president, as a leader around AI so that I can help lead my campus through this very important moment. And so activating your network, and it doesn't, and you might say, well, I'm not a president, Mike. You don't have to be a president to
Yeah.
activate your network.
Absolutely.
Like, regardless of where you sit in the organizational structure, you have agency. We all have agency. And so to be able to use this network, like just even being here today and engaging, I think is powerful. So I have a question for you, Raheem. I'm going to kick it off.
Sure.
Please, if you can maybe share a little more why you think AI's impact is not just technological, but how it impacts organizational processes and goals and structures, because that's really what you've helped us with. So maybe if you can
Yeah.
go a little deeper and help people understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think like so many technologies, um, the impact of those technologies goes beyond just the initial technology itself. Like, so when you think about the opportunity, this notion of thinking about plus AI kind of like a bolt-on over legacy infrastructure, legacy processes versus the plus AI, right? Like this openness and willingness to rethink and reimagine. And I think if we truly allow ourselves to kind of rethink and reimagine, we would acknowledge a few things that, many of our institutions are under-resourced. They have never had the capacity that they deserved or the funding that they deserved to enact the missions that we have, right? And so I think in that kind of a worldview, AI could be an enabler. It could augment the capacity of the incredible staff at many of these institutions to do more, to do what they're being asked to do, frankly. So that's why I think like we need to understand that, the technology will only go so far as well. Ultimately, there's humans deciding how we leverage these technologies for what purposes. And we have to be open to rethinking processes, to rethinking structures, to truly leap into that future. And I definitely do agree with you that like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, our organizations may feel different, they may look different. My hope is that they are not less human. My hope is that they are not less impactful. My hope is that they're not driving less inclusion or less belonging, but we're actually doing a better job of those things, right? So I think that's why we have to kind of think about that AI plus paradigm.
Yeah. I think it's also that recognition that, we have a system and structure of institutions that haven't fully worked for us and weren't necessarily built for the kind of environment, community, culture, strength, and value that we bring in. And the opportunity to can we leapfrog and say, can AI be a tool for us? Not
Yeah,
raison d'etre, but the tool to where we need to get to create more of that equality and commitment and
yeah,
effort, and from a student focused lens. Because I do think education is still that human enterprise. It's not replacing us, but can we
absolutely.
use it for the good we're committed to with those limited resources, which, is key, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for Mike and maybe also Raheem, but like what are some of your current because AI is moving so fast and because it's hard to keep up on everything, like what are some of your concerns about um again, I think Long Beach City College is doing a good job of moving fast but carefully and cautiously. Like what concerns or what worries do you have? Like what do you see under the surface that other people don't see, I guess, Mike, is the question.
I'm gonna say a couple things. I think one, and I think it's been named, but I want to drill down on it more, is that this technology is moving so rapid. You said that every 3.5 months, it's like doubling in its capacities. That's mind-boggling, right? And so historically, higher education, and because our values are rooted in participatory and shared governance and
Yeah,
these structures and bringing people together, we are going to have to not move away from our values because that's core to who we are as institutions, but be able to really be nimble enough to have the structures and responses to respond to the technology waves as they're happening. So again, so that it's not happening to us, but it's happening with us. And so really helping people understand the mindset is happening with us, not happening to us. And so it might require some agility that we have not had to have necessarily with previous technological iterations. And so I think that's something, and I always believe in having the brave conversations and naming things, because if you can't name it, you can't really solve for it. And so I think being able to just really talk with people about like, well, what does this really mean if we're going to be more agile in these spaces? And then assessing where people's comfort level on, because for me as a leader, and I think any good leader, you want to bring people along with you in this process. You don't want to get too far out ahead of your team. And so, being conscientious about that is important. I think another thing that is under the hood or we need to pay attention to is that there are probably some bad actors out there
yeah,
as it relates to AI. Or there's folks that are going to want to sell us this. And one of the things that you taught us that I really appreciate is you said, we're vendor agnostic. Because if you lock into a particular vendor, sometimes it's like you configure around that, and then all the workflows and all the energy is around that particular vendor and their limitations and their strengths. And so to really like zoom out, and how do you leverage all these different tools in a way that promotes your strategy? And if you aren't really paying attention to that, you could fall into a trap, I think. And so those are two things that just come to mind.
Yeah, thank you. Always pláticas just get us started with things that are very important. I just want to acknowledge where we are in terms of our time. We have some thoughtful listeners who've added some questions in the Q&A. So I want to see if we can get to one or two of those, knowing that we'll follow up with you if you let us know with additional information here. But one of the important questions that someone asked is that, acknowledging that you've got faculty buy-in now, Mike, but was there what was the lead in ground zero or socializing or to bring faculty along in doing this work? What was it the trigger for you all?
So I would say, again, sometimes things start bottom up and then top down, and then you just kind of meet in the middle. And so what I saw was that there were pockets of faculty doing some really good things in this space. We have a really dynamic academic senate president, Dr. Jerome Hunt, that's, leading some of these conversations through the Senate. We had, like I said, the discipline faculty like Dr. Vincent Caleb, who literally was blown away by a presentation. I walked into a space with one of the AI work groups, and he had this full presentation and a vision that him and another colleague were able to fully articulate and say, if we're not doing this, we should be thinking about these things. And that's helped
Okay.
accelerate the work. So it's a combination of things. And then we have our, we try to make sure we're keeping people informed. So we have like our main governance group is called CPC. And so, work's been presented to them. And so you have to, what I want to say, it's not one touch point. It has to be an ongoing multiple touch points, because you're trying to build a movement. So you start with where there's a coalition of the willing, right? And then you continue to expand and expand and expand till you have kind of a certain scale that we're trying to achieve at the institution. And so we're not at scale yet. Like I said, many of these documents are in draft form. Many of these strategies are still under review, but we are like at the tipping point, the precipice of moving to a place where we can start to rapidly move to scale. And I think that's kind of been the approach. So you're looking for faculty champions, you're looking for administrative champions. We have our dean of OLET, Dr. Hussam Kashu, and our chief technology officer, Bob Carmen, who have been also really engaged. So like, it's very cross-functional. Like this doesn't belong to like one group of people or one office. It's really a cross-functional approach.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I'd ask Rahim, and I mean, and it's kind of a derivation of one of the questions that's in here, but as you work with institutions to help them along their journey, at Excelencia, we try to help institutions along their own authentic journey. What are elements that you're looking for to see kind of a readiness to engage in AI and do the kind of work that's ethical, thoughtful, and hit some of that framework that you shared with us, Rahim?
Yeah, maybe Amin and I can tag team on this.
Yes.
I think one of the things that I think is really critical, and so one of the things that we've done is we created kind of a self-assessment for institutions to kind of reflect and drive conversation around kind of what their aspirations are and what their current capabilities are across multiple areas. So both on the kind of strategy side, the use case side, but also on the infrastructure, data architecture, data quality, like those things actually really matter, right? The core systems that they're leveraging. So I think that's been really helpful because again, we respect the vulnerability required for colleges to accept that, like, look, we're kind of a work in progress in figuring this out. And that's the premise for us working with them, right? Is what I would say is most colleges haven't figured it out, right? Like that's one of the opportunities with the moment that for the first time, I think there are colleges and universities that have very different resources, very different technology stacks that are all in kind of the same starting point of figuring this out. So I think it's a real opportunity, but that's one of the ways we've been trying to have conversations kind of grounded on that self-assessment, that self-observation. But Amin, I'd love for you to chime in as well.
No, I think that's right. I think leadership and a like some of this work is hard and some of it's uncomfortable. And I think having leadership and a willingness to change really makes a big difference. I think there are a lot of things to be concerned about. I think equal access, I think ethical access, I think the environmental issues, those are all things to think about. But also there are also a lot of reasons to move forward and every institution is different. I totally understand and acknowledge that. But I think ultimately, if leadership is interested, you can find a way to bring in the things that are relevant to your institution. It's not going to look exactly like it does at Long Beach, but it'll you can definitely make large strides with the right people in the right positions.
Yeah. Thank you. Just like that, our time is quickly ended. There's so much more that I know each of us could share about this, but I want to share with our colleagues who are still listening with us is, we gave a good example, and the team at Long Beach City College is actively engaged. We saw some of our colleagues at Miami-Dade are here. Others of you are in different levels and spaces that are listening in. Appreciate Raheem and Amin coming in and also talking about their facilitative role. This is a community of practice where we are wanting to make sure we are being intentional and we are leading in determining what it means to serve Latino and all students with the kind of quality education and effort for consideration. So please don't consider this the one and only conversation. At Excelencia, we're happy to connect you with other institutions doing this work, certainly Long Beach and Miami-Dade, who are affiliates, Seal certified. For us, the Seal certified have some of that perk that Raheem is talking about. They've made a commitment to be on this journey to reassess where they are with where they need to be to serve their students. And Mike gave a good example of that. I would ask you to continue to be engaged in this conversation. Reach out to us, reach out to our colleagues. We're happy to connect you in this space. For us, it's about sharing and learning what's working, what isn't. The vulnerability that Raheem and Amin were talking about is absolutely key. Let's continue this conversation in robust ways. We're committed to showing what works and providing access to those opportunities to do so. I know that Mike has continued to do that with his entire team, which is very robust, and sharing is a big part of their continual learning as well as their continual evolution of not just their own institution, but a community that's serving students of all backgrounds in more robust ways. So thank you all for your time. I want to have 1 minute each. Any last comments that you would want to share as we close this out, but also kick this off into a more meaningful conversation that needs to continue with our colleagues at AQL and Long Beach and others. So I'll start with you, Raheem, and then Amin, and then Mike. Just 30 seconds to a minute as we wrap up our time here that you want our colleagues to know.
Yeah, look, my quick headline is this is a crazy moment that we live in. Like there's some really crazy, terrible things happening in our world right now. At the same time, like we are also on the cusp of some really interesting potential breakthroughs. And I think that this is a moment that requires higher education to kind of lean in and engage and be actively involved in shaping the future of AI in the sector. And so just courage, 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 like lean in. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Raheem. Amin, please.
That's going to be hard to follow. I will say very briefly, I think this is a very daunting and sometimes scary thing. So I think just picking one thing and starting with that and seeing how that works, what doesn't work. Yeah, you have to start somewhere. So just one small step.
Great. Thank you, Amin. Mike, please. Oh, you're muted.
I apologize. I'll expand on what Amin said. For me, one of my mantras is don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think this work can feel like a little overwhelming. Like I said, I had to build my fluency and understanding around AI and how to lead in this space. And so I think to say start small. We all have agency. And engage in ways. One of just a real small practice I started doing is I engage with ChatGPT every night just to kind of build my own skills of what it's like for the user experience for our students. And so I think again, and then aligning and centering our students in all the decisions we make, from the ethical questions to the solving problems, putting students at the heart, and specifically our most underrepresented and vulnerable students. I think if we build these systems around them, all students benefit and all students will be impacted positively.
That's right. That's right. Thank you all. And that we're not doing it alone. And that was the other part of this, because it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to take chances. It doesn't always work out. But when you've got somebody you can lean on and learn from and share, there is that wonderful opportunity. So thank you all for your time. We will follow up the resources being included in the chat. And we will also be sharing this with you all to start a more critical conversation as you continue. Please share questions, comments, feedback to us. We want to make sure that this conversation continues and that this is a community that leads in the effort and isn't being done onto, as all of our colleagues have shared. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to the follow-up conversations about this in more meaningful ways. Thank you all.
Thank you.